For Chief Obinna Nwosu, a man who built a sprawling empire from nothing, the world was a chessboard he always controlled. But his perfect game is about to be shattered by the most unlikely of opponents, a ghost from the streets. This is the story of a billionaire who thought he had everything, until a poor girl with a tattered football and an impossible secret forces him to confront the greatest threat to his empire. Truth about himself he never knew. The armored Mercedes-Benz, a fortress of glass and steel, swerved, its tires screaming a high-pitched protest against the hot Lagos asphalt. Chief Obinna Nwosu, a rich man whose wealth was a testament to both his brilliance and his ruthlessness, did not flinch. His security detail, a silent phalanx of men in black, sat rigid. The threat was not an ambush or a robbery, but a ghost from the teeming underbelly of the city. A flicker of movement he had glimpsed from the corner of his eye. It was a small girl, perhaps no older than 10, darting from the curb, a tattered football under her arm, a blur of faded fabric and quick reflexes. The driver, a seasoned professional, had corrected in a fraction of a second, but the near miss had shattered the illusion of invincibility that surrounded the chief. A faint, lingering scent of burnt rubber hung in the air, a physical manifestation of his mortality. He looked back through the tinted window. The girl was gone, swallowed by the labyrinthine streets of Ajegunle, a place where dreams often became hopeless and new ones were born in the shadows. Chief Nwosu's empire was a sprawling colossus of shipping lines, tech ventures, and oil contracts. He was a master of the long game, a man who built his fortune brick by brick, deal by deal. The incident left a strange, disquieting feeling in his gut. A week later, the feeling returned, this time in the opulent marble foyer of his corporate headquarters. He saw the girl again, not in the flesh, but in a grainy, low-resolution security feed from the previous night. The girl, a phantom in the dark, had bypassed state-of-the-art security systems and was sitting quietly on a pristine leather couch, her bare feet leaving faint smudges on the glass table. She wasn't stealing. She was simply there. The security team was baffled. The motion sensors, the pressure plates, the infrared beams, they had all been bypassed with an impossible grace. The video showed the girl, her face a perfect mask of youthful innocence, touching nothing, taking nothing. She simply sat for an hour, looking at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, then slipped away as silently as she had arrived. The security chief, a man who had worked with international intelligence agencies, had no explanation. Chief Nwosu felt a tremor of something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. He had spent his life acquiring things, building walls, creating a world of impenetrable security. And now, a single unassuming street urchin had breached it all without even a hint of malevolence. He ordered a full investigation. He wanted to know everything about this child. The search began in the slums of Ajegunle, a place of 1,000 winding alleys and 1,000,000 forgotten stories. His team, a group of ex-military specialists, moved through the city like silent predators, their faces grim and unyielding. They found nothing. No one knew the girl. No one had seen her. She was a myth, a shadow, a whisper on the wind. The more they searched, the more she became an enigma. The security footage was the only proof of her existence. The chief found himself looking at the video on a loop, searching for a sign, a clue, a reason. The girl's presence was a riddle, a challenge to his very sense of control. Chief Nwosu's empire was built on a foundation of information. He knew everyone's secrets, their weaknesses, their desires. He had always been one step ahead, a chess master playing against lesser minds. This child, this shadow, was a pawn he couldn't see, a piece that moved outside the rules of the game. A strange paranoia began to settle in. The feeling of vulnerability was a constant companion, making him feel almost as hopeless as the people he saw every day. He started to wonder if this was a warning, a message from an unseen rival. But the girl had no demands, no threats, no agenda. She was just a presence, a silent witness. The chief finally took matters into his own hands. He drove his own car, without his security detail, into the heart of Ajegunle, a poor district he had long forgotten. He navigated the narrow, crowded streets, the sounds and smells of the city a symphony of chaos. He was a king in a foreign land, his presence an anomaly. He walked through the bustling market, his expensive suit a beacon in a sea of simple fabrics. He was looking for a ghost. He felt 1,000 eyes on him, 1,000 silent questions. He felt the weight of his own hubris. He had built a world of separation, a fortress to keep the chaos out. And now he was standing in the very heart of it, a man searching for a child who had no name. He walked past the open sewers, the makeshift stalls of the poor, selling everything from fresh produce to pirated movies. He saw children playing football in the dusty alleys, their laughter a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He saw a girl, the same age as the one in the video, with a tattered football under her arm, and his heart leaped. But it wasn't her. He continued his search, his sense of purpose a strange, quiet fire. He spent hours walking, a billionaire and a rich man lost in a world he had long forgotten. He had grown up in a place like this, a long time ago. But the memory was faint, a blurry photograph from a forgotten past. He had erased it, replaced it with a new history of power, wealth, and success. He finally found her, not by sight, but by sound. A single melodic tune, played on a makeshift flute carved from a piece of wood. The music was haunting, a melody of sadness and hope. He followed the sound to a quiet corner behind a dilapidated building. The girl was there, sitting alone, the flute to her lips, her eyes closed in concentration. The football lay beside her. The chief stood in the shadows, a silent observer. The music filled the space between them, a bridge across the vast chasm of their different lives. The girl's eyes fluttered open. She saw the chief. She did not run. She did not flinch. She simply looked at him, her gaze clear, ancient, and wise. The chief found himself unable to speak. The silence was not awkward. It was charged with a strange, undeniable energy. The girl put the flute down and picked up the football. She bounced it once, a perfect, controlled motion. She then kicked it, a soft, deliberate kick, and it rolled to the chief's feet. The chief, a man who had not kicked a football in decades, looked at the ball, then at the girl. The girl simply waited, a faint smile on her lips. The chief bent down, a stiff, unaccustomed motion, and picked up the ball. He held it for a moment, its poor, worn leather a stark contrast to the soft leather of his gloves. He kicked it back, a clumsy, uncertain kick. The girl caught it effortlessly. They continued to play, a silent game of catch, a strange, unspoken communication between two worlds. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The girl, without a word, turned and walked away. The chief watched her go, a sense of loss and confusion settling in. He had found his ghost, but he still had no answers. He had come searching for a reason, but had left with more questions. He had gone to find a threat and had found a girl with a football and a flute. The encounter was a puzzle with missing pieces. He stood there for a long time, the weight of the city and his own life, a heavy burden. The next day, Chief Nwosu found himself back in Ajegunle. He was drawn to the same spot, a moth to a flame. The girl was there, but she was not alone. A group of men, older and bigger, were surrounding her, their faces twisted in anger. They had broken her flute, the pieces scattered on the ground. They were demanding something from her, their gestures aggressive and threatening. The girl stood her ground, her small body unyielding. Chief Nwosu's blood ran cold. This was not the silent ghost from the security footage. This was a child in danger. A protective instinct, dormant for decades, flared to life. He strode forward, a force of will against the hopeless situation. His voice a low, rumbling command. The men, startled by his sudden appearance, froze. They looked at his expensive suit, his powerful presence, and their bravado crumbled. They melted away, a silent retreat into the alleys. The girl looked at the chief, her eyes filled with a gratitude that was a universe away from the silent wisdom she had shown before. She looked at the broken flute, her face a mask of profound sorrow. Chief Nwosu knelt, a man of power humbled, and picked up the shattered pieces. He felt a deep, wrenching sadness. He had saved the girl, but he couldn't fix the broken instrument. He had saved a life, but he felt helpless. The girl looked at the chief's face, at the raw, undisguised emotion, and for the first time, she saw not a billionaire, but a man who was grieving something, a sadness that was a mirror of her own. The chief found a craftsman in a small stall, an old man with gnarled hands and a gentle smile. He showed him the broken pieces of the flute. The old man shook his head. He could not fix it, but he could build a new one. The chief nodded, his heart full of a strange purpose. He waited for 2 days, a man of infinite patience, a man who was used to getting what he wanted. On the 3rd day, the old man presented him with a new flute, a masterpiece of polished wood and intricate carvings. It was a beautiful thing, a work of art. The chief paid the man handsomely, a gesture of gratitude that went beyond the monetary value. He had a new mission, to find the girl and give her her new instrument. He went back to Ajegunle, his movements now purposeful, his presence less of an anomaly and more of a quest. He found the girl in the same corner, sitting alone. The girl looked up, her eyes a question. The chief presented her with the new flute. The girl took it, her fingers tracing the smooth, polished surface. She looked at the chief, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. She had never been given a gift, a gesture of kindness without a motive. She had lived her poor life in the shadows, a forgotten child. The chief had no words. He simply watched, his heart a strange mix of sorrow and fulfillment. The girl put the flute to her lips and began to play. The music was different this time. It was not a sound of sadness, but a symphony of gratitude and joy. It filled the air, a beautiful, haunting melody that drew people from the surrounding alleys. They stood in silent awe, a crowd of 12 people, a community of witnesses. The girl was no longer a shadow. She was a beacon. She was a voice. Chief Nwosu stood in the background, a silent observer. He had built an empire, but he had never created a moment of such pure, unadulterated joy. He had never felt so rich. He had never felt so alive. For the rich man, a different kind of wealth had been discovered. He stayed there for an hour, listening to the music, watching the girl's face, a face that was now filled with a light that had not been there before. The girl finally stopped playing. She looked at the chief and gave a small nod, a silent thank you. The chief nodded back. He had found his answer. The girl was not a threat. She was not a rival. She was a messenger. She was a symbol. She was the physical embodiment of a life he had left behind. She was a reminder of what he had once been, a child with nothing, but with a spirit that was boundless. The chief returned to his fortress, but it felt different. The high walls and security systems, once a source of comfort, now felt like a prison. The luxury was a cage. He had spent his life building a barrier between himself and the world he had come from. And this girl, a representative of the poor and forgotten, had breached it with a flute and a football. The girl had shown him that he had lost something along the way. He had lost his connection to the simple things, the pure things. He had lost his humanity. He had become a machine, a calculating automaton whose life was a series of transactions and acquisitions. The girl had reminded him of the joy of a simple kick, the beauty of a simple melody. The girl had given him a gift, the gift of himself. A ghost of a memory, one he had buried deep beneath his empire, rose to the surface. Years ago, a tragic accident had claimed his wife and 2 young children. In the wake of that immeasurable grief, he had built his walls even higher, vowing never to love, to marry, or to have children again. His pursuit of wealth had become a hollow substitute for the family he had lost. The girl, with her resilience and her music, had not just breached his physical security, but his emotional one. She had unlocked a part of his heart he had sworn was gone forever. He went to his office, his mind a whirlwind of thought. He looked at the blueprints of a new project, a new skyscraper, a new monument to his success. The design was all steel and glass, a cold, unyielding monolith. He looked at it, and for the first time, he saw it not as a triumph, but as a tombstone for the man he had once been. He took a pen and began to draw a new design. Something different. Something with light and life. Something that would bring people together, not keep them apart. He found the girl the next day, in the same corner, and sat beside her. He did not give her a gift. He gave her a promise. A silent, unwavering commitment. He had no words for her, only a look that conveyed everything. He took her small hand in his. A week later, the legal paperwork was being drafted. Chief Nwosu, the billionaire and rich man who had lost a family and built an empire in its place, was adopting a daughter. The girl's name was now his. He took her home, not to his grand fortress, but to a smaller, more intimate house he had built in the outskirts of the city, a place with a large garden and an open space to play football. The empty rooms of his life were now filled with a new purpose. He still built, but his new foundation was not for himself. It was for her and for the thousands of other children like her. He used his immense wealth not to acquire, but to give. He built community centers in the slums of Lagos, places with libraries, computer labs, and music studios. He built a place where a child with a talent, a child with a dream, would never be a shadow again. A place where the hopeless could find hope. He was no longer just a billionaire. He was a father. He had lost an empire, but he had gained a family. He had found his true wealth, not in the numbers on a ledger, but in the light in his daughter's eyes. The lesson for the rich man was clear. The most profound acts of creation are not in building an empire for yourself, but in rebuilding a life for others. This story shows how true value can be found in the unexpected places, and how a simple act of human connection can be more profound than all the wealth in the world. It's a journey of a man who thought he had everything, only to realize he had lost the most important part of himself. What did you learn from the story of Chief Nwosu and the street kid? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below.